In this episode, I spoke with Bekah Slider, and man, this was such an interesting conversation. I was so amazed and mesmerized by just the depth that we went into. And we talked about identities and belonging and technically unbelonging and all the shifts that she has navigated in her life over the last 5 years with this unsubscribing to who she thought she was and who she really is. And she peeled back the layers and asked herself some really hard questions. And the shame and the fear put aside and got down to the bottom of it. And I think a lot of us want to belong. And I think I mentioned this in a few episodes ago when I was at that podcasting summit. There was one thing that stuck out to me. It said, you have the choice to choose between authenticity and belonging. And when you choose belonging, you end up belonging to no one. And 99% of us choose belonging. Bekah pointed out that pain is a necessary part of courage, and that you're probably sitting in pain if you're needing to choose courage over comfort. I think a lot of us maybe need to focus in on embracing pain in order to be courageous, because it's a part of the process versus trying to lean away from it. With identity, we talked about how sometimes your identity can be intertwined in someone else's, or how our identities are a part of a programming or conditioning that makes it hard for us to pull off the layers. And you have to be willing to ask yourself a lot of hard questions, and you have to be willing to face yourself. And a lot of the time that will come with shame and fear. And we don't want to face those kind of feelings. Those are scary feelings. We just want to stay in our comfort zones that feels safe to us, and it keeps the peace. And that's where Bekah shakes things up. You know, we talked about asking lots of questions to anything and everything. I think the older we get, we kind of just get into these patterns of, oh yeah, okay, it is what it is. But no, truly ask questions. Be curious about your life and your identity, and ask those questions. Well, why do I believe that? Or where did that come from? And be curious with it. Try and peel back the layers of your own life and ask, who am I apart from all of that I affix to? I think that's such a beautiful thing that she brings up. And ask yourself, what is truly aligned to your very own soul? And this wasn't directly talked about in this episode, but there was some overlap when I was listening back to it. We were talking a lot about identity of who I am versus purpose, which is what I do. And that does come out of your identity, but they are two very separate things. Welcome to the Kindred Journey podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hi, Bekah. How are you today?
I am doing pretty good.
Good. Well, thank you very much for being on this call or being on this interview and joining me on the podcast and taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Maybe you could tell the audience and the listeners a little bit more about yourself, since we've had the opportunity to connect. I would love for you to maybe share a few fun things about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, By trade, I'm a speaker and a coach. And in that realm, my passion, my greatest passion is really helping entrepreneurial women master self-doubt, get over imposter syndrome so they can really own their value, their worth, and create the life of impact and income that they desire. That's what I do by day. As far as unique things about me or things that make me quirky me, I love bacon. I love sex. I love wall murals. And I love dancing. Like any type of dancing is great. I go out and do a lot of Latin dancing, but I just like dancing for dancing's sake, right? Around the house, whatever. Our house can be like a musical at times because there's always dancing and singing going on. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know how to make life fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely, I think that's a key pillar, like for values. People talk about their own values, like what's a value in your life. And I would say playfulness or fun is definitely up there for me. And I think back to like how that was and why that came about. And it's really easy for me to pinpoint. My childhood was not the most ideal, very controlled environment, very strict, all of that. So, like being playful and fun, I'm one of five kids, that was kind of an outlet. The goofiness, the playfulness, the dancing, all of that stuff was an outlet for just feeling like I wasn't going to die, all the
Hmm.
time. I was just like, okay, there's some fun to be had. And in some ways, kept me alive, kept me almost like kept hope in me somehow. So I think that it naturally turned into something that I very much value.
And the fun person that you have become.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome that you share that, turning lemons into lemonade kind of situation,
Yeah.
that's something that you gravitated towards as a child and through your upbringing. And maybe we can dive into that. I love for
Yeah.
women to just come on and share. Thank you for taking the time, not only, but wanted you to know that this is a safe space for you to share your story. So
Yeah.
whatever you say is honored and respected. I don't have to agree with you. I've even told listeners on, I think it was my first episode, like, if you don't like it, find something else to listen to because there's a lot of podcasts out there. So I
Yeah.
just love for this to be a safe space for women to come and share and be their
Yeah.
vulnerable, authentic, true self. So thank you. And just wanted to
Yeah.
let you know that preface before we get started. Is there a specific season or moment in your life where you have stepped into courage when comfort was no longer an option that's sticking out to you or standing out to you?
Yeah, gosh. I feel like my entire life has been defined by that.
I love
I
that.
say that it's I don't even say that as any type of like badge of honor because I am sure your listeners know and the people who come on your podcast know that that means if you're getting to the place where you're choosing courage because comfort is no longer an option, what that also includes is a lot of pain,
Hmm.
right? Like you're in seasons where things are a shit show in whatever way that looks, whether it's your career or your friendships or anything. And I feel like it's been a cyclical process. And the other thing I've noticed in my life is that if you have a commitment to grow, a commitment to evolve, a commitment to not stop the learning process, this is inevitable
Mm.
because it requires you to step out of comfort. But I look back at my life and even beginning in my childhood. And I think what I was feeling led to share on is the idea of courage over comfort when it comes to relationships and what we're willing to tolerate and upping our standard. Because this has been a theme that has continued to play out in my life starting at a young age. I remember being in high school and I went from being bullied to being the bully,
Mm.
which isn't surprising when you consider the fact that if you don't have support in your life, you don't have good mentors, you don't have family members you look up to or feel safe to be around and talk to, you're going from one extreme to the other. There's no real health. So that's what happened to me. And I went from being bullied for several years in middle school to becoming more of a bully in high school. And after about 10th grade, I got really fed up with it. And I thought, I don't like these people that I'm friends with. I don't want to be around these people. This isn't who I want to be. And I'm miserable.
Hmm.
And that was the first time in my life that I chose courage over comfort in a big way with relationships. And I made the decision to drop all of my friends.
Wow.
And I'm sure you remember high school well enough to know that that's your world. Like that's your life. You care. Everybody cares about everybody else's opinions. It's very hard not to, especially at that age. But I knew that I would rather have no friends than be around the people that I was around. And so that was the option I chose. And I remember very vividly the main girl that I was friends with who was kind of the biggest bitch really and everyone was the most afraid of. And she was like, well, what are you doing? I told her, I was like, I can't be friends with you anymore. And she's like, did your parents tell you that? Is it because your parent? And I was like, no, I just can't do it. And having go at least a year straight, I basically had no friendships.
Wow.
I knew people, I said hi to people, but I had no friends. And the cost was worth it. It sucked and it was lonely, but the cost was worth it because I was more grounded in myself and I felt better about myself. And then because again, I didn't have any support, I went back into um we moved. This is what happened. You know, when you move, it catapults things to like relaunch. So I had no one my senior year, no friendships. And then things got out of hand and I ended up becoming friends with not bullies, so that was good, but people who were unhealthy. And then I ended up in a super toxic relationship with the dude. And my entire life became consumed with him, probably for about 2 years and 2.5 years. And I was about 19 years old when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't do this. I have nobody. I just have him and a couple friends, and I don't like any of these people. Like they're all toxic. And I made the decision again. I can't do this. I'd rather have no one than be around these people. So I don't know that I learned too much between those two stages because I went right back into some pretty toxic relationships, but I was also very young.
But you had the courage to leave those relationships. And that I feel like, especially in that time of your life, when all you want to do is belong and all you want to do is connect, like you just want to feel safe, seen, belong with a group or a person, or like, I feel like that you pulling away from those relationships and finding the courage to do so taught you tremendous amount of not just courage, but about yourself, and for you to withdraw from other people and belonging to others or with other groups or society. Well, like we're humans, like it's
Right.
from the beginning of time to go back to yourself. And like you said, you were more grounded with yourself.
Yeah.
And the cost was worth it. So I think you might, like you said, you didn't probably learn from one scenario to the next, but I think you learned probably great things about yourself. Because imagine if you would have stayed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think when I think about the second time leaving, that was harder because my identity was very intertwined with that guy.
Mm.
And he was narcissistic and abusive, and I was wrapped up in who he was, making myself feel like I was something. So it took a lot more courage to walk away from something like that when your identity is wrapped up in it than even the prior, where it was just some friendships. There was some identity wrapped up, but not as much. And so after that, I started going back to church. I grew up very conservative. So I started going back to church, got involved with the young adults there because I was pretty young still. And I actually met my husband and my current husband, and we ended up getting married very young. Don't recommend that personally. Not, we have 3 children. I don't recommend it to them. I'm like, yeah, no, you don't know who you are. You don't know who
Right.
the fuck you are at that age. Like, please don't get married that young. But I basically shifted because I didn't have the tools at that time in my life. I didn't have exposure to personal development like I do now and mentors like I do now. I launched my identity. I switched it. I went from like, okay, I don't know who I am still. And so I basically fed it all into religion, into Christianity, into Jesus, into the church. And because I met my husband at church, we ended up, staying in the church. He told me he was in the military. He's like, I want to get out and I want to start a church plant. I'm like, oh God. So it deepened, this is who I am now. This is what I do. This is how I be. And We were in ministry for 10 years. And I even went into leadership and became a pastor for many years. And my entire identity and world was wrapped up in the church, in Christianity. And so about 5 years ago, when I started deconstructing and actually asking a lot of questions about why I believe what I believe and how does it serve me? Is it supportive? Really, do I want to believe this? Was this somebody else's beliefs? Was this all of those things started unraveling the decision to walk away from the church and to walk away from Christianity was probably one of the most courageous things I've ever done because my identity was that. That's how I knew my value and my worth and nothing apart from it. And so not only was I walking away from that, I was walking away from the only community I knew. So once again, the same story played out where I chose to walk away. And you would think in doing so that you'd still have support or people around you because they're good people. But really what played out was that I had no one. And my entire deconstruction process was one of the loneliest things I've ever walked through in my life. And to this day, I look back and think, I don't even know how I got out of that. I don't even know how I was able to launch into that in that way because I literally went from having loads of people in my life, a community, some ground to stand on to. It wasn't like me jumping off a ship onto another ship. I wasn't exchanging one type of identity as a Christian or in religion for something else. I literally had nothing. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I didn't know where I was headed. I didn't know how. I just knew that it was not aligned with my soul, that something inside me was like, this is not right. And it's really hard to walk through roads like that, to walk down paths like that, where not only are you alone, but you feel like very, very few people can even understand. I think that's probably the loneliest part of it, is feeling so separate. Like this is such a weird or unique thing that a lot of people don't go through. And so it almost sounds like, okay, well, you just decided to like not go to church and not do that anymore. It's like, no, you don't understand. Like I was preaching from a pulpit. I was the one in the front lines, like in the front of the church, worshiping the most. I was the one who was considered a prayer warrior. I was the one leading groups of women. And she was like, this was everything about my life and my identity. So to deconstruct that and walk away from that and have nothing to go to, have no one to go to, have no one on the other side, like, yeah, you're going to be fine. It's going to be like, it was excruciating. And then you tie that to the fact that all the beliefs I had were ingrained in me at such a young age that for the first year of deconstructing, I thought for sure, I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to go to hell. And that's all I could think about. I'm alone. I've got no one. I don't even know how to process through what I'm dealing with. I've walked away from everything I've known and everyone I've known. And I think I'm probably going to go to hell because of it. That for sure is one of the most courageous things I've ever done. And I don't regret it. But I'll tell you, it has been years of grieving. And right when you think you're like, oh, I feel so settled in it. Yesterday, something triggered me, and I'm like, I found myself just grieving that loss again. And also knowing the truth that I couldn't find out who I really was and honor who I really am and be aligned within my soul at a deep level unless I was willing to walk away from all the things that I had put on top of me to cover up the authentic self that exists underneath. The things that seemed good, that were wrapped in love, but really founded in fear, that I took on as my identity, and that kept me from actually knowing my true identity, apart from everything else, apart from everyone else, apart from any religious views. Like, who am I? Who is Bekah underneath all of that? Because we find our identity so often in the programming and the conditioning and things we were brought up in, the told, like the societal stuff, the cultural things. That's not who we really are, though. But also that's why it's so hard for people to find out who they really are. Because you have to be willing to pull off the layers. And that means you have to be willing to ask a lot of hard questions. And that means you have to be willing to face yourself. And most people, the immediate response of that is shame and fear, and nobody likes those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd rather just stay in the comfort zone that feels like it keeps us safe, feels like it keeps the peace. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by where this conversation's going, because you are literally in those experiences sharing you've done the opposite of what society, like, we want to belong, we want to feel comfort and safe and have an identity, and like you said, our identity's wrapped up in these cultural conditioning, society norms, what we want to attach to something, and you're doing the opposite, you're detaching from everything. And so I find that I'm, because I'm a Christian, I'm a Lutheran Christian, and I didn't grow my faith until we went through some pretty hard stuff a few years ago. So that's what I'm doing, what most people do, is clinging to something and having something, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm so intrigued, and like, so what did you uncover? Like, when, like you said, finding the real Bekah, and I'm just so intrigued by the courageousness that it takes, because you're kind of on an island, like, you're so isolated when that is not a feeling of comfort. That is a feeling of the fear and aloneness. And so maybe, I mean, just, so how many years ago was that happened?
5 years ago.
Okay.
Yep.
So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so what called you or enticed you, or what can you maybe share, like, where that thought process started to come from? Or like you
Yeah.
said, it wasn't right, it wasn't it wasn't
Yeah.
aligning with me, maybe, like,
Yeah. I
if,
mean, I think it starts by giving yourself permission to ask more questions.
mm,
And
instead of just agreeing with, oh yeah, okay,
yeah,
like, oh, like, our phones text for us these days, we don't even know how to spell words, like, we're getting programmed, and we were just talking about GPT and like, we're getting programmed to not think for ourselves. It ultimately is how,
yeah,
like, this world's like,
yeah,
automated text, automated all these things, that it's like, no, like, embrace the hard, think about
yeah.
things, use your brain, like, actually have some creativity behind that. Or, so sorry to
Yeah.
interject, but I
Oh,
think,
you're fine.
like,
Yeah.
what you're saying is so like, kind of, we're being programmed to be like robots almost,
Yeah.
so it's pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
And I think there is so much more programming. Even before all the technology, there was always so much programming that we didn't realize. I mean, when you think of like even the patriarchal approach of society, right? Like there's so much programming that we don't question. For example, I was talking to someone about this the other day. Why is it that men have only the pronounce, or I don't know what it's called, like the pronoun, like Mr., right? Mr. is for a man, but for
Mm,
a woman, it's Ms., Miss, or Mrs. to
mm,
distinguish whether she is married or not.
mm-hmm.
Why is that? We don't need to know if a man is, but we need to know if a woman. Like, there's a lot of societal things that are like, that's actually kind of fucked up. Like when you start thinking about how the
Sure.
difference is. But anyway, so
No,
giving
I've
yourself
never thought of
permission to,
that.
yeah, I hadn't either until the other day. But giving yourself permission to start questioning anything and everything. Nothing's off the table of what you're able to question. And that again, it's not that it was you don't question anything. I wasn't in a church that was like, oh, you never question anything. But there were things that here's the truth of it. I know for myself, there was if you're familiar with trauma bonds, and how they're formed, like with people going through trauma together, that can be a very unhealthy relationship. Or maybe
Mhm.
two people just went through the death of someone they love together and kind of trauma bonded, right? I look back at my relationship with Christianity and I'm like, wow, no wonder I was in it so thick. I had a trauma bond. That's literally, and this is the first time I've ever actually said this out loud. But when you
Because
have
of your childhood.
because of my childhood and then because of when I went back to it after that terrible relationship I had with the
Okay.
boyfriend, I was so desperate and so hurting and so heartbroken and in so much pain and agony that it was like, oh, this is safe. This is something that can give me hope. And so you hold on to it. And I didn't question it because of the sense of safety
Comfort.
and feeling of comfort that it brought me. Right. So why question it? Like I feel like I'm getting what I need. And I want to also do a caveat here and say, like, I don't have any problem with people who still identify as a Christian, who go to church. Like that's not, it's not,
It's not
there is
about them.
benefit.
It's not
No,
about them. Right.
no, this is my journey. And I think that everyone needs to follow their own journey and figure out their own path and what works for them and what feels aligned for them. But for me, it was a lot of, I wasn't willing to question things. So when I started giving myself permission to ask better questions, I really started asking, like, why do I believe that? They say that when you deconstruct your faith, a lot of times it starts with one brick, one like brick of the foundation of what you believe, right? If there's this
Mm-hmm.
foundation. And for me, the first one was many years before it started a domino effect, which was about homosexuality. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense how this is a sin. And literally, the Bible says it blatantly, like it's a sin, right? So you're supposed to subscribe to the Bible being the word of God, and it's not, it's infallible, all this stuff. And I just thought this is so fucked up. Like, because I knew several gay people and I loved them. I thought they were amazing. I'm like, what is wrong? What is wrong with their life? Like, there's nothing wrong. It just made no sense to me. So that slowly crept in to help me get to the point where in 2018 was when I really started, just everything exploded in so many levels. And I started asking myself, what do I believe and why do I believe it? And does it serve me? Is it a supportive belief? And the biggest thing that I ran into was realizing, and I think I said this earlier, was that a lot of the staple beliefs of Christianity are really founded in fear, but masked with love. So for
Mm.
instance, um, hell, like that I can't even subscribe to that anymore, like a literal hell. You're born a sinner, for instance. Like for me, like I can't subscribe to that. You're born bad. Like I don't actually believe that at all. I believe our true nature is love. And do I think people step out of that because of unhealthy thoughts and patterns and trauma and all that? Of course, there's evil in the world. People choose evil, but I believe like your true nature is love. That's why love feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it feels good to love and be loved. It feels good to be kind. It feels good to give and to be like helpful and supportive. It feels good to be in good relationships with people, like because that's your true nature. So there were just several things that the more I asked questions about, the more I was like, I I don't think I can subscribe to this anymore. And when you're talking about actual like staples of Christianity, you realize like, okay, I can't actually even say that I'm a Christian anymore. Not that I don't care one way or the other, but because these are the staple beliefs of Christianity. And I'm like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
this is not supporting me. This is not serving me. This is not the way I want to go with my life. And I see how all of these things have been like, this is who you are, Becca. This is you see yourself through these lenses. These are the color glasses you see yourself through. And I was willing to take all of that off to just be like, okay, have I even ever taken the time to really get to know myself apart from any of this stuff, apart from other people's opinions, expectations, church, my identity as a leader or pastor in church? Like, who am I apart from all of that? Like, flush all that down the toilet and then what's left? And that's a journey in and of itself right there.
Yeah. I mean, what's coming to mind is what is your identity when you have no identity at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that and we all do, right? Like we all have an identity, but it's figuring out, it's like, it's like when you first start getting to know someone who you want to date and like form a relationship with, how there's all this curiosity involved and like who they are and what they do and what do they love and what's on their bucket list and what are their hobbies and like all of that. That's the way you get to know and how I got to know myself and my identity apart from all of that stuff. Because what happens though is you have to realize that, okay, nothing's off the table anymore. Nothing, there's not going to be any shame tied to things you desire or want to be wired in or like, or none of your desires are bad. If that's how I start from that place, Who am I? What do I like? What lights me up? What do I want to say yes to now? What do I want to say no to now? And so you kind of start from ground zero and build that back up through the same thing that you deconstructed with, which is good questions. Good questions. So even though it's hard and even though it's lonely, it's actually a really beautiful process because you get the privilege of getting to know yourself all over again without all of the ways you see it through the lens of other people and other programming and all of that. Like it's it's been one of the most freeing journeys too, because the more that I've gotten to know myself, the more compassion I've had, the more love I've had, the more ability I've had to give myself grace and all the things like, oh, I see. I often like personify my brain, right? Like, oh, okay. And my old thinking patterns, because if I'm going to say no to all the fear mongering stuff with Christianity, well, then I have to say no to all the fear mongering beliefs that wouldn't even be considered Christian beliefs that also are unsupportive and hold me back.
Mm.
Right. And so it was just this journey of like, wow, what is all inside here that does not support me? And then when I strip all that away, what's left and how do I want to live? How do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? What feels good and aligned to my very soul? Yeah. And that's such a unique individual journey, but it's also just one of the most beautiful gifts we can give ourselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like making peace with ourselves in the deepest, most vulnerable, intimate way ever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a very beautiful description of it. And I think um I love how you show up unapologetically yourself, and you don't have, I mean, what did that process look like for you? Like you said, Christian or not, like the things that were not serving you anymore. How did you, I mean, to have a belief or a narrative or a system, my internal dialogue goes all day, every day, so how did you, like, what were the steps or to break those things down? Obviously you started with asking a lot of questions, like, okay, this no
Yeah.
longer serves me. Like, was there I mean, I'm sure lots and lots of practice, but like, that's hard because I'm in the, I'm trying to do some of that right now. Like, that doesn't serve me anymore. I'm not that person anymore. Or,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to break down those habits because it's just habitual at
Mm-hmm.
this point and it's just almost like on autopilot. Does that make sense?
It
What
totally
the
does.
question? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is really a commitment to your own inner work, right? A commitment to not making it wrong. Not that one of the biggest things that I hear from my clients is, and I've seen myself get into this a lot too, is like, shouldn't I be further along by now
Mm,
with my growth? I've been in personal development or I've been pursuing like, I've been doing inner work. I've been like in mindset stuff for however many years. Like, why are these things coming back up? Why am I still having problems with this? Why am I still like struggling with this bad habit or these bad thoughts? And so one of the things that helped me radically was very, very much at the front end, getting on the bandwagon of I am going to operate first and foremost with outrageous self-acceptance and self-compassion. I knew getting rid of judgment, self-judgment was the key to my continual evolving and my continual ability to like witness myself, see myself, be with my pain, let myself heal, let myself grow, and also have compassion for everyone else instead of sitting in resentment. So that for me was a key staple, like a commitment to being aware when the self-judgy thoughts come and a commitment to like flushing them through and be like, nope, okay, this, because the self-judgment is what really is such a disservice to us more than anything. And it will
mm-hmm,
keep us stuck. We can't grow and evolve and stay in a curious mode if we're in a judgment mode. They don't go hand in hand. Curiosity and critiquing and criticizing, like they're literally on the opposite spectrums. So I love that. Anytime the criticism would come, I'm like, okay, I can't go to just being like, oh, I'm just gonna high vibe it and tell myself a bunch of great things. Like that doesn't work for me. And also you're lying to yourself because you don't believe it. So the next step is never going to be, oh, just give me some great affirmation to tell myself something. It's let me get curious. Goes back to the questions, right? Like, let me just get in a state of curiosity. If I was curious and I'm like kind of taking an approach where I'm outside of myself, looking down on myself, separating that part of you. This is very interesting. Like getting in a non-judging mode, what would I say to myself then? What better questions could I ask? How could I see this differently? Where would I go from here? And that's literally what has been able to drive a rapid amount of my growth and to see it at such speeds. Because what happens with, I didn't know this was going to happen, but what happened was I deconstructed, religion, Christianity. And I thought when I finally felt like I landed, which when I say landed, I don't mean I had this new set of beliefs. People will say to me now, like, okay, you don't believe any of that anymore. What do you believe? That's what they'll say. And the way that I approach that is everything founded in love, that literally the core foundation is love, I can still subscribe to and get on board with, right? Like love your neighbor as yourself, right? Like things like that. Everything that's founded in fear, I don't subscribe to anymore. If the belief has a fear undertone to it, that's why I said I don't believe in hell. I don't believe that we're born sinners. Like anything that has a foundation of fear, I just no longer subscribe to. So I got on that and I really landed and felt solid about, I don't have all the answers and I don't know all the things exactly that I believe, but that's where I'm at and I feel good about that. And I thought, straight up, Leslie, I thought my deconstruction is over. I feel good. I feel grounded. And that was just the beginning. Because of how wired into me all of that stuff was, I didn't realize how much it filtered into other areas of my life. So the way I show up in relationships, how I think about marriage and what that looks like, right? Deconstructing marriage, deconstructing just my identity as a whole, apart from Christianity, just like who I am and the way I'm wired, deconstructing sexuality because I grew up in purity culture and like, oh, it's just the amount of things that it had a domino effect on. And I was like, whoa, what is happening? But I had to keep giving myself, I didn't have to, but I chose to keep giving myself permission to ask more questions and figure out what's going on and what do I think now and what has served me and what hasn't. A lot of it goes back to, is this supportive or unsupportive? I mean, of course, there's some supportiveness in all of the things because we wouldn't have subscribed to them, but oftentimes it's founded in something that is, again, more about fear. So it's supporting our need to feel safe, not truly supporting us as a person who wants to thrive and evolve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And thank you for unpacking that for me. I think, yeah, you said something about where you've landed, I guess, and it sounds like it was a tails. I'm gonna use like I said, people normally go towards belonging, you go towards the opposite. Like, so, you said where you landed. So not that it was a tailspin. So I'm using, what is that when you use like the opposite, like if it's a negative, but you're using it as a positive, what is that called again? Is that my grammar? I'm not going to be.
My brain is so.
Anyway, like, so I'm going to say tailspin, but it doesn't sound like it was like a tailspin into deconstructing your entire self is what I mean, and not in a negative, but it's a tailspin is normally a negative, but I'm making it a positive because you kind of, does that make sense? I'm trying to say I'm so bad, but I wish I had the right term. Somebody can probably correct me on that or inform me on it. One of my sisters, they're teachers. Anyways, but like, as far as have you landed, or it sounds like it was a tailspin of like, just like kind of in that kid brain, like why, like it never, the whys never stop with little toddlers. Like, like what do you believe in? Where have you landed? Like you said, if anything, kind of maybe rooted in love. And if that's where it lies and that's where it stands, then that's fantastic. But like, I guess maybe can you elaborate on that journey a little bit of just kind of opening all these doors or to Pandora's box? Or
Sure. I think it's funny you said the why, because I grew up as a kid who literally that was always my question. Why? Because I didn't understand the way things were running, the way that my home was run and the way that my parents were. And I would always ask them why, and never anything would get answered. It was because we said so. So I always hated it. So I became a person who did want to understand why, what's going on behind the scenes? What's the root? What's the root? What's the root? And that's probably what launched me into ever being a person who, it was like almost inevitable that I would deconstruct my whole life, because I need to know like what's underneath. So it's kind of a loaded question because there's different angles of my life as far as what they look like now. I think when it comes to spirituality, I'll go with that term because I actually still am spiritual and I still believe in a sense of higher support, higher power. I just don't think it's a deity and I don't think it's subscribed to a certain religion. I believe religion has benefits. It also can be pretty damaging to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So spirituality, though, I definitely believe in that, but I believe it is like an energy of love, of unconditional love. That's literally what that energy is. That's why it's our true nature. We're like from that same energy. It's part of us. We're part of it. And I don't think it wants to be worshipped. I don't think like there's all the power stuff that it's like I would never tell my kids to worship me.
Mm-hmm.
That's ego, right? So like there's just some interesting stuff there. So with that, that's kind of like spiritually where I've landed, and I feel really good about that. I do feel supported by a higher power. It's just not under the context of religion or a specific deity, and certainly not in the masculine sense of a male god
Mm-hmm.
in general. I just like there's so many things that I look back, I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Women are literally the creators on this earth. So I don't
We
how
create life.
the god figure ever became a male, I'm not sure. And not even that I'm saying it is female. I'm just saying like for me at this point in my life, I'm like, if there was an actual deity, it would definitely be a woman. So just my 2 cents. So then you get into I think it's so funny how it's affected so many different things. So then it's like looking at marriage and sexuality. Like, what does that look like now? And trying to unpack that with a husband who he actually deconstructed as well behind me. And when I say behind me, I just mean he didn't start when I did. So he was about like a year after I started. He probably started. And I don't know if we've landed in the same places either, which is okay. Like it's not, I am not on a journey with an agenda to tell everyone they should think like I think and be like I
Right.
be and believe that I don't know, not at all. Um, so I just started questioning a lot of stuff in regards to our marriage and the way it was set up and like the things that had been acceptable that really I looked at and I'm like, I don't know that these are acceptable. Like, I don't know if this is acceptable, but I think I've allowed it to be because like keep the peace. So there was a lot of processing through a lot of stuff there. And then sexuality wise, even though I grew up in purity culture, I didn't subscribe to that in regards to like, oh, I saved myself for marriage, whatever. It still impacted my sexuality because I knew I was bisexual when I was like 17 years old. And even when I married my husband, I told him straight up, like, I am attracted to women. I am bisexual. He was fine with it. Of course, then you enter a monogamous marriage. How does that play out? Right? It doesn't. And then on top of that, you go into ministry and you just suppress it. You're like, yeah, I thought it, yeah, like I used to be bi. I thought I was, but I like still had fantasies about women all the time. Like I was truly bisexual. I just couldn't allow myself to tap into it or it to be okay because there's so much shame involved. It's wrong and it's bad, it's sin, all of those things. So then it was like, oh my gosh, now that I don't subscribe to all these beliefs, I can be like safe and free to embrace that part of me instead of reject it and make it bad and wrong. So that came up, and that's been like a process to work through. Parenting changed drastically. Not that I was ever a real strict or controlling parent because I wasn't. I hated that in my childhood, so I certainly wasn't going to subscribe to it with my own kids. And there's always been a deep level of vulnerability and authenticity with my kids from me because that was what I craved so much as a kid. I just wanted my parents to like tell me their problems, like not all their problems, but like tell me the things they fucked up and like tell me
Be
they're
real.
sorry.
Yeah.
Be real. And there was none of that, right? No owning their shit, no nothing, no talking about weird, hard conversations because that's uncomfortable. Here's some books instead. So I never did that with my kids. I was very open from a young age. So that was a benefit I had long before I deconstructed. But when I deconstructed, I was like, oh my gosh, girl, let me tell you what changed the most with me as a parent once I deconstructed. The level of fear that I had as a parent about my kids fucking up, getting STDs, sleeping with people before they were married, or people that they didn't love, or being a bad person, or cussing too much, or doing drugs, or all the things that like would be typical fears that parents have. they just dissolved. I wasn't afraid anymore. And it's not that I was like, oh yeah, go do all the things and be crazy and wild. That wasn't it. It was just like I finally trusted them
Mm.
to have their own journey, and that there was going to be situations and things that maybe they made choices in that like they weren't happy with or they regret, and I could be the safe place for them to land, no matter what
Mhm.
that looked like. And I would fully love the shit out of them unconditionally. And they would know, like, I'm not going to sit here and project my fears on you anymore.
Mhm.
I already had a great relationship with these kids, but it has tripled since I
Mhm.
deconstructed. And it's because all of the fears that I was holding on to that I wouldn't even consider, I wouldn't have told you they were fears. I probably would not have identified them as fears. I would have
Sure.
more been like, no, this is me being a good parent, and I need you to not do this, and no, like all of those things. I feel so grounded. I sleep so much better at night in regards to thinking about my kids. I'm not it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible the freedom I feel when it comes to being a parent. And then, like I said, our relationships, they were already great, and now they're just absolutely mind blowing. My
Wow.
oldest is about to be 19, and she literally considers me one of her best friends. And it's such a healthy, that's what I always wanted, right? Isn't that the goal that our it's such a gift that our kids, like, yeah, we parent them and we raise them, and yes, when they're young you have to be the parent first, but my
Right.
dad and mom would always say, like, we're your parents, not your friends. That was
Mm.
always their phrase. And I always thought, in context, this is back when I was a Christian, I would always think Jesus says, like, he's God and he's our friend. I'm so confused by that fact that you can be my parent but you can't be my friend. That always,
Mm.
like, fucked with my head, like, this doesn't make sense. So for me, it was like, well, I want to be there. I want to have a friendship as well. Surely there's a level of respect, and like there's going to be
Sure.
consequences and things that happen. But like, why would I want to be friends with these like amazing humans that came from me?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so,
Well, and I think you tapped on it is the trust. Like you
yeah,
and I think a lot of times we spent, and not just in parenting, but I mean even I'm in the trench phase, the newborn early phase of childhood, but like the trenches of worrying about the sickness, like we have little to no control over, like you said, your job is to parent first, and yes, I will be here to be your friend, and you trust. If you give them the trust, again, there's boundaries and consequences and all the things, but like if you allow them
sure,
to have the teachable moments in their life where they're gonna mess up, at least they're not doing it when they're 35, and because you sheltered, you protected them so hard and so much,
yeah,
like don't do this and don't do that, and have the fear of what can happen when it's like it's truly out of your control anyways. So
yeah,
spending the time and the energy on the worry, I think I even had a podcast episode a few weeks ago, is like worry less, or worry is a wasted emotion, because it's just like it's so depleting. It doesn't do anything.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's a prayer for what you don't want. It's basically
yeah,
what I call it.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I totally resonate with what you're saying, and I think it's part of the parenting process and the journey, is like yeah,
mhm,
it's part of the foundation. You build this foundation of parenting, and trust, and boundaries and consequences, all those things are layered in there, and the trust to let them be their own, and like you said, individual self is,
yeah,
I think, such a beautiful thing. And like you said, you're a safe place for them to land no matter
yeah,
what, and that's love. Like you keep touching on love, and that's such a beautiful thing. And love is unconditional. It's not, it's a gift. It's not
yeah,
earned, it's not deserved. It's truly just is. It is what it
yeah,
is. It's not, you don't earn love. That's so,
yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah.
that's so beautiful.
Yeah. And it's wild to shift that too, when that's the way you were raised, is you do earn love.
Mm.
Like, you have to earn everything you get. And it's like, this is mind fuckery. I can't do this. Yeah. And so just shifting that in, that's the beauty of having your own kids, is like you can write a new story.
Hmm.
You can write a new story. And that's I mean, for my kids to witness too, because again, I've got almost 19-year-old, then I've got a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old. So the older two especially have witnessed a massive shift, like a pendulum swing, right? Because they were at the church with us. They were doing all the things with us. They were like, and to leave that and to have your own kids witness you and say, wow, you've grown so much. Like you're so different and you're so, and not that we didn't like you before, but like you're so different in the best way. I mean, that's just a testament to the transformation and the evolving and the truth of really being in alignment, knowing I'm in alignment. Yeah,
Yeah,
with myself.
I think that's
Yep.
beautiful. And I think the word freeing just keeps coming to my mind. It's so free of all the shoulds, of all the shame, of all the, I mean, you're just living that is authenticity, that's
Yeah.
living life authentically. And I just, what a freeing experience. And not that it was easy and what you went through to get here. And I think there's so many tangible things that you've shared and takeaways from our conversation. I think it's just all very beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I'm
Thanks.
and yeah, curious and just like ask more questions and have that curious mindset, not
Yeah.
there's so much guilt and shame and shoulds in today's world.
Yep.
Do this. Or like even associating good and bad. It just is. It's like it is what you make it, but
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be all, bad, or you can find the good in the bad, but like to
Yeah.
constantly put an identity on good versus bad. Like that's something
Yeah.
else I've been working on, because it's like it just is. It's part of life,
Yes.
it's not good or bad.
Yes. Right. A lot of it's just neutral and we put the meaning to it.
Mhm.
Right. We put the
And
meaning to it.
attach the emotion and the energy
Mm,
and the
Yep.
exhaustion behind all of that.
Yes.
So
And that's what it is, exhaustion. That's the exact perfect word because the pressures and the shoulds and the have tos, all of that, it's like a weight on top of us that doesn't give. No,
yeah,
it's exhausting. It's not the way we were
absolutely.
meant to live.
No, no, absolutely not. Well, thank you, Becca, so much.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just loved everything about our conversation and asking questions. And like I said, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but hindsight 2020, looking back, is there one thing that you would tell your old self through these moments and seasons of your life? I know there were a few that we touched on. So
Yeah, there's so many things I think, but I think the biggest thing, and this is something that I try to instill in my own kids now at a younger age, is that it's safe to trust yourself.
mm,
I think that we're taught to put our trust in others and our trust in certain beliefs and programs and all of these things and authority and all this stuff. And what's missing is the return home to our deeper wisdom, to our deeper knowing. And we all have it. We all have it, but we're not taught and conditioned to trust ourselves and trust our path and trust our journey. And so I really would have loved to tell my younger self it's safe to trust yourself and to kind of grow that trust within yourself, like keep in contact with that part of you that your intuition that you're wanting to foster and grow, because otherwise you're hearing all the voices out here in your head of all the conditioning, but that deep knowing, like you can trust it even when it's
mhm,
telling you like, oh, this is not in alignment, and you're like, what, but this is everything my life is. Okay, it's okay,
yeah,
because yeah, that I think that's one of the biggest things that keeps us from evolving is not really cultivating that self-trust.
mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's spot on, because I can relate to that too. So like your
Yeah.
intuition, follow your, deep down, even if it's against cultural norms, society norms. But if something's that whisper in your ear that's telling you something, to follow it,
Yeah.
and even though it
Yeah.
will probably take courage, you won't be comfortable. Um,
Yeah.
so, well, thank you again. Would you be able to share where the listeners can find you or connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on social, Facebook and Insta, and that's at Bekah Slider. Bekah with a K. You put that in the notes. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, my first name is spelled different. And then my website is RebekahSlider.com, went with the formal full name.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then I have a podcast as well, The Courage to Fully Live, on Apple and Spotify.
I love that. And that just launched a couple days ago
Yeah,
from when we're recording this. So
yeah.
congratulations. I'm so
Thank
excited.
you.
I know I subscribed. I need to listen, but I need to check
Yeah,
it
it's
out.
good stuff.
Well, thank you, Bekah, so much. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, Leslie. You too.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.